All right, this presentation is going over the assignment, but also just more practice with square and cube roots, because that's all that we're doing in this unit is square and cube roots. All right, so this first problem, find the area of a square whose side length is 3. Well, hopefully you remember the area of a square is just s squared. So we do 3 squared, so it's 9. So the area of this square is 9 centimeters squared. A cube is very similar. The volume of a cube is s to the third. So if it is 3, we're going to do 3 cubed, which is 27. So the volume of a cube of side length 3 is 3 centimeters cubed. All right, solve. Hopefully you remember, and there's not a lot of room here, that you have to isolate. So we're going to add 5 to both sides. I'm going to write it over here. So now I have 6x squared equals 54. And then I'm going to divide by, it's multiplied, so I'm going to divide by 6. So x squared is 9. I'm going to take the square root of both sides, so x equals positive and negative 3. If you're just watching me do this without trying on your own, you're not going to learn as much. So please take a moment with examples and try on your own. In the last presentation, we talked all about squares. This time we're going to focus more on the cubes. So you should have written out, and I'm not going to write all of them for you. 1 to the third means 1 times 1 times 1, which is 1. 2 to the third means 2 times 2 times 2, which is 8. 3 to the third, 3 times 3 times 3, which is 27. So I could say the cubed root of 1 is 1. The cubed root of 8 is 2. The cubed root of 27 is 3. So like when you take the square root, you're trying to find what number multiplied by itself equals that square root. Here with the cube root, it's the same thing, except you're taking 3 factors. So what number multiplied by itself 3 times gets you that number that we're talking about? So 4 times 4 times 4 is 64. So the cube root, and that's how we write it with the little 3 there, is 4. So hopefully you finished your assignment. You can check the answer key for this one, but continue this because I really want you to be able to use this on the assessment. So when you're solving cube roots, you're still isolating that x value, and here, instead of taking the square root, we're taking the cube root. And yes, I need to see that you're putting that little 3 in there. So I'm thinking, what number multiplied by itself 3 times is 27? Well, 3 times 3 times 3 is 27. Now, the most common mistake here is putting negative 3 as well, like we did with the square roots. But if we did negative 3 times negative 3 times negative 3, a negative times a negative times a negative is a negative. So that would be negative 27, not positive 27. So that does not work. So cube roots only have one answer. One answer. One answer. Square roots, if you're solving that equation, have 2 answers. All right, so the cube root of 125. So we're going to show that we're taking the cube root by putting that little 3. The cube root of x cubed is x. The cube root of 125 is 5, because 5 times 5 is 25 times 5 is 125. Not negative, though, because a negative times a negative times a negative is a positive. So we're going to solve this one, putting a 3 in there. So x equals 2 times 2 times 2 is 8, so the cube root of 8 is 2. This next example is a little bit more difficult because you have to isolate that x cubed first. It says plus 10, so we're going to subtract 10. We always undo. So x cubed equals 1. And then we are going to take the cube root and make sure you're putting that little 3. So x equals 1. Positive 1 only, because 1 times 1 times 1 is 1, but negative 1 times negative 1 times negative 1 is negative 1. All right, this next example, I notice I have a negative here. Well, if this is x to the third, I'm going to undo that by taking the cube root. And if I do it on one side, I need to do it on the other. So the cube root of x cubed is still x. But now, what number times itself 3 times gives us a negative 64? Well, 4 times 4 times 4 is 64, not negative. But if I do negative 4 times negative 4 times negative 4, that is a negative 64. So the bottom line that what I want you to remember is if you're taking the cube root and your number is cubed, then your number is negative, then your answer is going to be negative. If your number is positive, then your answer is going to be positive. But with x squared, there's 2 answers, so it will be both the positive and the negative. So this last example from yesterday's assignment, the cube root of x cubed is x, and the cube root of negative 8 is a negative 2, because negative 2 times negative 2 times negative 2 equals a negative 8. All right, so let's review. We've been dealing with problems that have the square root symbol written in for us. If the symbol is written in for us, it gives us the context of if it is positive or negative. So here, the square root of 100 is 10. But this says the negative square root of 25, so I know we're talking about the negative root. This says square root of 36, so we're talking 6. The cube root of a number, if we have 3 factors that are negative, we know that there's going to be a negative under the cube root symbol. So if it's positive, we know it's going to be positive. So here, the cube root of 27 is 3, because 3 times 3 times 3 is 27. The cube root of 8 is 2, because 2 times 2 times 2 is 8. And the cube root of 64 is 4, because 4 times 4 times 4 is 64. If we included negatives with these, negative 4 times negative 4 times negative 4 is a negative 64. That doesn't work. So for these types of problems, there's only one answer. Only one answer. All right, let's review how to solve square root equations. Here's the x squared that I need to isolate. I always get rid of whatever's furthest away from it. So we have to get rid of that addition subtraction first. So I'm going to, it says plus 10, so I'm going to subtract 10. So now I have 2x squared equals 18. It's multiplied, so I have to divide. So x squared equals 9. And then it's a squared, so to undo a squared, we have to take the square root. X equals, now because we don't know the context, we put the radical symbol in, we have to have both the positive and the negative answer. So I'm going to draw my line separating the sides. It says here's what I want to get rid by itself, so I have to get rid of this minus 5 by adding 5. If we do it to one side, we have to do it to the other. So 7 plus 5 is 12. I'm going to bring this down. So 3x squared. It's multiplied, so we divide. So now I have x squared equals 4. It's squared, so I'm going to take the square root. So x equals positive and negative 2. So when you are solving square root equations, there are 2 answers. All right, let's practice solving cube root equations. There isn't anything on the same side as the x cubed, so we can go straight to, if it's cubed, we have to take the cube root to get rid of it. If you do it to one side, you have to do it to the other. And don't forget that little 3, that's a really common mistake. So x equals, and what we're looking for is what number multiplied by itself 3 times gives us 8. It's 2, because 2 times 2 times 2 is 8. If we did negative 2 times negative 2 times negative 2, that would be positive 4 times negative 2 is a negative 8. Since this was positive, this has to be positive. All right. Here the x cubed is not on a side by itself, so we have to first start by isolating it. It's minus 10, so we're going to add 10. So now that cancels. I'm going to bring this down. So 2x cubed equals 2,000. It's multiplied by 2, so I have to divide by 2. So x cubed is 1,000. And since it's a cube, we have to get rid of it by taking the cube root. Do not forget that little 3. We have to use correct symbols. So x is what number times itself gets us 1,000? It is 10. So with cube root equations, there's only one answer.